Tomorrow we once again as a nation celebrate the day that is called Labor Day. It is a day honoring work, but a lot of folks won't be working tomorrow, but we hope yours is a very happy Labor Day tomorrow. Labor Day has a rich history, goes all the way back to 1894. I don't know much about what President Grover Cleveland did, but one thing he did was he signed the law that made one day a year, Labor Day. Now, it falling on the first Monday in September came later than him, but he's the one sort of that gets credit for kickstarting this day, at least in a national sense. It is said in the late 1800s, at the height of the Industrial Revolution in our country, that the average American worked 12-hour days, 7 days a week. He didn't get a day off. And the working conditions then were many times deplorable. It is said that sometimes children as young as 5 or 6 also worked alongside adults in mills and in factories, and they only made a fraction of what adults made. Extremely unsafe working conditions, no access to sanitary facilities, they didn't have breaks or anything like that. Finally, some people said that needs to be somebody to regulate all of this and make sure that people are safe and treated well, and so they formed unions, and some came up with the idea, well, why not just have one day a year set aside to honor people who work? The Working Man's Day, some called it, and that's sort of a brief background to what tomorrow is. Tomorrow, of course, the day in honor of those who do work. Labor Day was born. We try to have lessons that sort of tie in with what's going on in our culture at least. And since tomorrow is a day in honor of work, we're going to talk about some folks who really did some work, traveling back about 2,500 years to the book of Nehemiah, chapter 3. And we step into this scene and we find the people who knew all about work and who knew all about back-breaking, hard work. And we'll talk about that in the course of our lesson. They've got to build a wall around the city of Jerusalem. Now, before looking at our specific text, make your way to Nehemiah 3, we want to set the stage by looking at the context in which these events occurred. Nehemiah, through no fault of his own, found himself in captivity in Babylon. He's there because his ancestors sinned, and God used the Babylonian nation to punish the Jewish people. The Jews who weren't killed by Nebuchadnezzar or left behind were taken captive to Babylon, and they would remain there and either die or at least be there for 70 years before some eventually came back. The Medo-Persian kingdoms then conquered Babylon and had a more favorable disposition to the Jews, even allowing some of them, those who wanted to, you can go back. You can go back to Jerusalem. You can go back and build your temple again. You can go back and build the city, your homes. You can go back and build the wall again. Well, this some of the Jews had done. The temple has been rebuilt. The worship of God has been sort of kick-started back again. But the protective wall around the city, which was so vital to have in those days, well, it wasn't there. And that placed the city in jeopardy from an enemy who might attack. But Nehemiah, again, is in this foreign land, and his brother sends him word about the condition back in Jerusalem. And it's tough times back in Jerusalem. The people are facing slander and reproach from the enemy. The wall of the city is broken down. The gates have been burned with fire. Somebody needs to do something, and that somebody is our man, Nehemiah. The first thing he does is the right thing. He goes to the throne of God in prayer and presents this to God. And then about 4 months later, he comes to the king with his dilemma. The king listens and he grants Nehemiah's request to go back to Jerusalem. And Nehemiah even took liberty of asking for letters of permission for the king to allow him safe passage through other territories through which he would have to travel to eventually get back to Jerusalem. He also asked for wood from the king's forest to help rebuild the gates and the wall of the city. And the king just sort of gave him a blank check and okayed all of that, and even sent a military delegation with Nehemiah to make sure he made it to Jerusalem safely. It took about 2 months to get there, and Nehemiah and his entourage finally arrive at the destination. And things were as bad, if not worse, than the report his brother has given him. The walls indeed are broken down, the gates burned with fire. Nehemiah went out at night to survey the scene, and he sees just how bad it is. All the while he's in his mind formulating, we're going to rebuild these walls. We're going to get back to a plan of action. He gave the people the necessary motivation. We want to rebuild the wall so that we're not going to be anybody's patsy. We want to rebuild the wall so that we will no longer be a disgrace. And everybody said yes, just about everybody. But there were three leading individuals who would hound the Jews throughout their work, trying to halt the rebuilding effort. This is the why of Nehemiah. His job, again, is to rebuild the wall of the city of Jerusalem. Nehemiah 3 is a summary of the rebuilding of the wall. The rest of Nehemiah sort of zeroes in on the specifics of that. Nehemiah 3 contains the names of those who did the rebuilding. The names of those who did the rebuilding. When you look at Nehemiah 3, it's awfully tempting to skip the chapter and just go on to Nehemiah 4. Nehemiah 3 is not nearly as interesting, in the minds of some at least, as, say, Nehemiah chapter 4. When you consult some commentaries, they will skip making any comments on Nehemiah 3, or the comments are very sparse, and even they will go on to chapter number 4. 32 verses of name after name after name. Can anything be more uninteresting than a list of names, especially to us English-speaking people? We have difficulty just pronouncing these names, let alone reading these names. Well, when you look at Nehemiah chapter 3, though, from the right perspective, and we must do that to get a great appreciation for this chapter. It's about work. It's about people who did a lot of work in rebuilding this wall. And again, we've got to have the proper perspective. Let's say that we were to go to Washington, D.C., and we were to sort of survey the scene there and take in the sights, and we go to the Vietnam Memorial. And you go there, and of course we've got sort of a miniature one in Tupelo, but there wall after wall of stone, name after name engraved, means absolutely nothing, right? What it does if your loved one's name is inscribed on that wall. Then you look at it, you see from a different perspective. Go to the cemetery. See stone after stone with name after name. Just a completely boring trip, right? Not if it's your wife's grave you're going to, or your husband's grave, or your child's grave. Then it's anything but boring. You look at it from that perspective. A lot of people, when they read the newspaper, skip the obituary section until the obituary contains our loved one. And then we don't skip it. And then it's very important to us. So Nehemiah chapter 3 takes on whole new meaning when you look at it from the perspective of the Jews. They are proud that those names are there, working side by side with their neighbor, rebuilding those walls one big stone at a time. And this is just a remarkable achievement we're reading here, a wall that was built because people were committed to the task and dedicated to the work. We have three simple sections to outline our study. This is a monumental undertaking, number one. Second, it's going to be led by a motivated leader in Nehemiah, number two. And three, this motivated leader leads a masterful organization of the people and the work, and they get the job done. First of all, though, do not minimize how difficult this work is actually going to be, rebuilding the wall. We're talking about a massive wall. We're talking about a massive wall, perhaps as much as 2.5 miles in length. This wall is not a picket fence. This wall is not a 5 feet high brick wall. Again, it is massive. It is several feet thick, several feet high, built to withstand any enemy attack and protect the people on the inside. The stones for this wall would have weighed tons apiece, and many of them have been toppled down in the valley below. You've got to get those stones weighing tons apiece up the hill and then on the wall. Can you imagine? We're not talking about cranes and construction equipment, no bulldozers, no backhoes, no heavy lifting equipment, anything of that nature, just muscle and sweat to do this awfully, awfully hard work. It's a massive undertaking because it's a massive wall. Second, it's a monumental undertaking because the people are discouraged. They've tried to build the walls before and they failed due to the edict of the king to stop. What's to say they're not going to fail again? Why start all this hard work when we're just going to have to stop again? Plus, we've got to get organized. We've got to work in harmony together. Who's going to decide who works where? Who's going to decide who does what work? Discouragement, discouragement, discouragement. Now, some people in this rebuilding, that's all they've ever done. I mean, these are bricklayers, as we would say, or stone masons. They know how to do this. But on the other hand, you've got an awful lot of people who've never picked up a stone before in their life. They've got to be trained. They've got to be taught. We look at the chapter, we see all different kinds of people from all different walks of life involved in the rebuilding effort. Craftsmen, tradesmen, townspeople, officials, various social classes, all that combined, well, it could be a very discouraging work. It's a monumental undertaking because there is opposition. There are people who don't like what's going on in Jerusalem. You've got fairly influential men standing off to the side, shaking their heads back and forth, saying, this cannot be done, it will not be done, you're wasting your time. They're doing everything in their power to stop the work, and they are relentless in their opposition. It is a monumental undertaking that Nehemiah is in charge of. But what is truly amazing is this. It only took these Jews 52 days to build that massive, massive wall. I mean, that's short of 2 months, isn't it? 52 days. 2 months would be 60 days. 52 days. One writer said this about their speed. Julius Caesar, who was to come centuries later, had no monopoly on the tactics and speed of surprise, for which he is justly famous. The enemies of the Jews were completely caught off guard by the speed and drive of Nehemiah and his compatriots. Before they could effectively organize to stop the Jews or destroy their work, the walls and gates were restored. Wonderful, with the help of God and with the help of a leader like Nehemiah. Number one, this rebuilding effort is monumental. Second, it's going to succeed because of a motivated leader in Nehemiah. Get these people up and moving and sweating and working required somebody to jumpstart all of that. Somebody to light a fire, if you will, under these people to get them started, to keep them going, and to finish the task at hand. And Nehemiah is that man. The plans have been done, that's chapter 2. Now the stones need to be laid, that's chapter 3. Nehemiah recognizes the importance of several things. Number one, he knew the importance of his reverence for God. First and foremost, at the top of the list, again, before he did anything, he went to God in prayer, and he's going to give all the credit to God for the work that is done. He realizes that needs to be number one. Second, he also knew the importance of his respect for his king. Now, this king we're talking about is King Artaxerxes of this foreign power who's given him the go-ahead and the wood and the military entourage to get him to Jerusalem. Nehemiah knows I need to respect the individual who is allowing me to do this. Not that Artaxerxes was a prince of princes. That is, he wasn't the best of men. We're not saying that at all. But I'm going to respect the king. Now, we know we've got an election coming up in our country. And if you're like I am, you're sick of hearing about it. And be glad when it's all over. But at the end of the day, when that election is over, whoever is president is going to be our president. If President Trump gets 4 more years, then he's going to be my president. If Joe Biden is elected president, then he's going to be my president. If some upstart independent pulls the shock of the world and wins, he or she will be my president. You respect the person in office. May not agree, may be hard sometimes to give that respect, But the Bible says as Christians, we respect the office of whatever office it is in whatever country in which we live. I'm going to respect the king, Artaxerxes. He knew the importance of his relationship with those who worked under him. Bosses of companies know if we will treat our employees right, that will be a boon to this company. It'll be a blessing to this company if we'll treat those who work for us right. Nehemiah is going to treat his workers right and then some. And then he knew the importance of his regard for the work itself. This is going to be work. I've handled a few concrete blocks, and that's work, but that's not work compared to what these people are about to do. It is a tremendous, tremendous effort, and Nehemiah does not whitewash or try to water down how difficult this is going to be. He knows it's going to be hard, and those people know it's going to be hard. He doesn't underestimate the scope or the difficulty of what's about to take place. He respects God, the king, the workers, and yes, the work itself. And now it's time to get to work. A masterful organization. And this, again, is brilliance, wisdom on the part of Nehemiah, and he had to have help from above to do all of this, obviously. First of all, there's going to be a division of the project into different sections. We call these manageable sections. Now, if Nehemiah had approached it like this, well, everybody just pick you a spot there on the wall, and everybody just get to work somewhere, and we'll just tackle this all at once. They'd still been working on that wall to this day. They never would have built that wall with that approach. The people would have looked on the project as an impossible task. But when you break this huge project down into about 40 to 41 sections, and you've got different groups working on each section, wow, that makes things a lot easier, correct? It's going to be hard work, but when you've got everybody working on a section of the wall, wow, that just makes a big difference. Let's say you haven't cleaned your house in a while, and tomorrow you've decided that Labor Day, I'm going to clean my house tomorrow. I haven't touched it in so long. Tomorrow morning you get up and you look at the house and say, where on earth do I begin? I mean, it's a hopeless task. This place is a wreck. If you approach it like that, well, good luck. But if you say, you know what, I'm going to tackle one room at a time. I'm not going to leave this room until this room is finished. When this room is finished, I'll go to the next room. Well, then you're going to clean your house when you tackle it one project or one room at a time. Building a house. Everybody doesn't do everything in building a house. You've got some people who will pour the foundation. You've got other people who will do the plumbing, other people who will do the wiring and the framing and so forth. And when you look at it like that, everybody doing their task, the house gets built. With the work of the church, our responsibility is to take the gospel of the world, 7+ billion people. When we look at that huge number, we throw up our hands and say, what's the use? We can't do that. But when we start with me, and we start with you, and we get the church right, then we help the community, then we help the county, then we help the state, then we help the nation, then we help the world. Well, you see, doing that way, you can make some headway. One person at a time, one area at a time, one region at a time. And so with that, delegation of this huge project into groups or into teams. A different group for a different section. I've got a couple of pictures here to sort of get us in mind what's going on here. This is obviously an artist's rendition of what Jerusalem would have looked at about the time of Nehemiah. It doesn't look like much, does it? I mean, this looks just like you can just kick this over with your foot. But this is sort of an aerial view, and to help us have a little bit of perspective, if we were to go from this point on this wall up to this point, you're talking about a mile in length, just one side. You have the other side about a mile in length, and then the two ends, you've got about a 2.5 mile, several feet thick, several feet high wall to build in rapid rapid fashion. And so, how are we going to do this? Well, here's how we're going to do it. Nehemiah chapter 3 is outlined around the work of the 7 gates of the city, starting with the sheep gate at the north, going around counterclockwise. The chapter talks about the different groups assigned to different sections. Verses 1 to 5 talk about the north wall. Verses 6 through about 12 talk about the west wall. Verses 13 and 14, not much, to the south wall. And then verses 15 through 31, the east wall. You've got different groups working on different sections of the wall. And that's how this is going to be accomplished. Why is the wall so important? Well, again, you have the head of the wall to protect the Jews. No wall meant no protection, and no protection meant no living. No living would mean no Jews. No Jews would mean no Jesus, and no Jesus would mean no salvation. So you can trace it all the way back, if you want to this wall. This wall is very, very important. And this is a coordinated effort. Now, what Nehemiah does, he knows that he cannot oversee this personally all himself. What a wise leader does is he delegates authority to people under him. You could call these, I guess, foremen. And they're going to be over people under them, and so forth. And that way, again, this coordination helps the work to get done. Now, in chapter 3, there are 75 people mentioned by name, and we don't take that to mean everybody. There obviously would be much more than that to work on the wall. But 75 people and 15 groups mentioned. Each group works on a section side by side with another section. You're going to find throughout this chapter phrases like next to him, or next to them, or after him and after them. This is just a massive undertaking, yes, but a massive coordinated effort. Now, we want to just scan the chapter. We're not going to obviously read, for lack of time, every verse. Look at the different types of workers involved. Number one, the priest. The priests themselves helped in the work of rebuilding the wall. Elisha, the high priest, rose up with his brethren, the priest, and they built the sheep gate. They sanctified it and set up the doors of it. This was hard work, building those gates. Priests are mentioned near the end of the chapter. Nehemiah 3:28, from above the horse gate repaired the priests. In fact, they're mentioned 2 times in between the beginning and end of the chapter. The priests are working. Now, somebody said, if anybody has an excuse not to work, surely the priest would be excused from working on the wall. I mean, this is heavy work. Some priests could have said, well, that's not my calling. I don't do outside work. I might break a fingernail. Well, some people may think like that, but these priests, they roll up their sleeves and they work just as hard as anybody else. I'm afraid that some of my kind, or some of Adam and I's kind, our kind, preachers think that somehow they're above physical work. There are preachers who think they are above physical work. I know of an individual who once bragged to me that he would never do secular work again. He would never, ever do secular work again. I don't know if he ever did or not, but I think about the Apostle Paul. He was willing to do secular work. He made tents in order to support himself. He did not feel himself too good to do work, and nor should any of us. And so the priests are involved. Notice, next unto him built the men of Jericho. Now, these are men who live in Jericho. They might have said, well, we don't live in Jerusalem. This is your problem. It's not our problem. Jericho's a long way off, and we've got our own issues. No sweat off our back that you don't have a wall around the city. But again, this isn't the mindset of people who are willing to work and pitch in. In fact, you can read through these verses of people from several cities coming and helping out, from Tekoa and Gilboa and Mizpah and other cities. They're in this together. Notice you've got some what you might call union men or guild members. Next to him repaired Uzziel, the son of the goldsmiths. Goldsmiths were people who did delicate work. We might liken them to a watchmaker or somebody who worked on watches. These would be those whom God had given the ability to carve intricate designs into gold. And again, their work would be small, and they wouldn't have calluses on their hands from the work they did. But they're willing to pitch in and do this heavy manual labor. They don't feel too good that they're above hard work. We find in the chapter that city officials are willing to do hard work. Rulers over districts or sub-districts, we might liken them to governors and mayors and so forth of today, willing to, again, roll up the sleeves and do this hard work. We even have, and maybe I shouldn't use the word even, forgive me for that, but we do have women who are working on the wall. Notice Nehemiah 3:12. Talks about the ruler of half part of Jerusalem. He and his daughters are working on the wall. Some would say women can't do construction work. We've poured a little concrete with projects we've had around the house, and we've discovered that Tanya is a great concrete mixer. In fact, I could just do a shout out here. If any of you out there in the internet land need a good concrete mixer, I know a good one. I don't know what she charges per hour, but women can do construction work. And that's what's happening here. Here's a father and his daughters who are working on the wall. Notice verse 29, the keeper of the east gate. This would be the guard. We might call him the policeman of that day. He pitches in. He's willing to work on the wall. Notice verse 32, you've got merchants there at the end there. Merchants are working on the wall. Merchants are those who, of course, buy and trade and sell things and make money. Some might have thought, somebody might have had the idea, well, this would be a good way to make money. Go up and down the wall and sell hot dogs and cold drinks to these who are working. I can make a lot of money doing that. But not these folks. They're not thinking that way. We have a task to do. This isn't a time to make money. This is a time to build the wall. And that they do. Also worthy of mention is where Nehemiah placed each worker. He arranged workers and the work for the convenience and motivation of those who are doing the labor. Many were assigned portions of the wall to work on in front of or next to the houses in which they lived. That way, at the end of the day, they don't have to walk several blocks to get home. I mean, they're right there where they're working. And on top of that, of course, it's going to be very convenient. It would ensure good work. I mean, if I'm going to build part of the wall next to my house, I take pride in my house. I'm going to take pride in that part of the wall next to my house. And if somebody attacks this portion of the wall, I'm going to stay and defend it because my family's there. I'm going to defend them as well. And so the high priest, they built the sheep gate. People would lead animals to sacrifice through the sheep gate. This would be important to them. And again, we've had this phrase, opposite his house. These are people working on the wall right next to or right across from their house. Very, very convenient for them. And this is not a stroke of genius. We're not saying that. It's not luck. This is planning. This is working alongside of God. And this is using the wisdom of God to get the work done. Notice recognition for each worker. In fact, the very fact that we have names here is recognition of those who built this wall. It makes you wonder, as Nehemiah surveyed the work that was going on, if he didn't pat some of those fellows on the back and say, you're doing a great job. Don't get discouraged. Turn a deaf ear to these trying to get you to stop. Keep it up. Keep up the good work you're doing. And of course, we know that they did. We've got one fellow who's tucked away in verse 20. He's easy to miss in this list. But notice Baruch, the son of Zabbai, earnestly repaired the other piece. He was earnest in the work that he did. Everybody else repaired, but he earnestly repaired. I mean, he was a go-getter when it came to work. He was zealous in the work he did. I spent the majority of yesterday mowing my yard. My heart was not in it. I did not do it zealously. I was not earnest. I did it because it needed to be done. If I'd had my rathers, I'd rather been doing other things. Well, this Baruch knows, we're talking about something a lot more than mowing a yard here. We're talking about building a wall. We're talking about saving lives. If anything's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And he singled out, maybe he worked overtime, maybe he didn't take breaks, maybe he worked harder and faster, but he singled out for going the extra mile. Has a great work ethic. In this list of 75 names of Nehemiah 3, there's one name that is conspicuously absent, and that is the name Nehemiah. Now, there is a Nehemiah mentioned, I think, in verse 16, but that's not the Nehemiah, the leader of this. He doesn't pat himself on the back. He's a very humble individual, and when it came to giving credit, he didn't say, look at what a good job I've done. Ultimately, he gives all the credit and the glory to God, deserving, of course, of every bit of that. Now, we're about to wrap this lesson up, and I hate to do so on a sour note, but there's a bit of negativity in this chapter because some people said, we're not going to work. Typical of some people, right? Work to be done, well, not me. The refusal of some to work. Next unto them that the Kohites prepared, notice their nobles put not their necks to the work of the Lord, as one translation renders this, they would not stoop to serve their Lord. We're not given the reason why. Maybe they felt they were too good to get out and work hard. We're not going to break a sweat. We're from Tekoa. We have other things to do. Well, we don't know why. Was it selfishness? Was it laziness? Well, again, only God would know the answer. But again, the point being, when there's work to be done, in just about every situation, there are some who say, we're not going to work. We're just not going to do it. And that, sad to say, includes at times the church. And we don't want to be one. We certainly don't want to be one in that category. The old saying is true, if you can't help, don't what? Don't hinder. If you can't help, don't hinder. If you're not going to work, don't hinder those who are doing the work. And so that's the mindset. As we close, some said we're not going to work. And so their names aren't listed in this chapter for a record of the work, but for infamy, they live on as people who would not work. Whatever your plans are for Labor Day tomorrow, we hope it's a great holiday. Be thankful that we have jobs and the opportunity to work, and be thankful that we do need rest and we do need a time off work. As we wrap these thoughts up, we want to give a couple of closing points of application. Nehemiah's job, rebuild the wall around Jerusalem. With the help of people pitching in and God above, they accomplished that task. They accomplished the work he set out to do. Today as Christians, our task is to bring glory to God. That is our number one responsibility. We live to bring glory to God. We shine the glory by the work of the church, seeking the lost, evangelism, strengthening the saved, edification, serving the suffering, benevolence. And like those in Nehemiah's day, we accomplish so much more when everybody pitches in and does their part in the work. We all can edify. Edify just means to encourage people. We can encourage people just by being here, just by sitting on a pew, being present at every service, encouraging the discouraged, helping those who've fallen. Anybody can edify. When it comes to benevolence, well, we may not financially be able to do what others do, but we can do what we can. We help people as we're able from the contribution. We help people as we're able from the pantry. How much does a box of Jell-O cost? I really don't know. It doesn't cost much. Most people can afford one box of Jell-O. That might encourage somebody's day as we help people from the pantry. We all have a part in evangelism by the life we live, by the words we say, by an invitation to worship, to a Bible study, mailing a tract or a gospel meeting announcement, or addressing truth for today. The list is endless. Praying for opportunities, open doors, and praying for the wayward. Nehemiah and these folks got that wall built because everybody did their part. And we can shine the light in this Verona community or wherever we live if everybody pitches in and does his or her part, as each person has, whatever abilities they have. It starts with us. Again, before we can convert the world or help the world, I've got to start with me. I need to obey the gospel if I haven't. I need to put my faith in Jesus. Repent of my sins. I'm a sinner, no doubt about it. I need to confess my Christ as Lord before men and be baptized in water. And as I get out of the waters of baptism, I can get to work. Be on fire, be zealous for the Lord. And as I, as a Christian, sometimes falter, stumble, and fall through sin, I can have people pray for me. God will forgive me, and I can get up, and I can be just as fervent now, this side of all that, as I was at the very beginning. Remember this: the church is to be an every member ministry. There's a congregation in West Tennessee. They have a sign out front. They have, by the word minister, they have the word minister colon, and the minister there, they've got every member of this church. And they're exactly right. We are all ministers. We are all servants. We all have a work to do, and what work we can do when everybody does his or her part. That's the message from Nehemiah chapter 3. Respond if you need to as we stand and as we sing.